Speed.
Camera, rolling. This is scene 16, shot 244, take 2.
Mark it. Action. December 10th, 2013. That was the day where I put the final touches on what would be my very first short film as a filmmaker. To be fair to my high school self, I had made other short films before, but those didn't really count. They were more of just learning the ropes and getting my feet wet kind of thing. Think of them as sort of baby steps. Learning how to walk, but, in filmmaking terms. But on that day, way back in 2013, it was different. This was the culmination of my first official film, one that actually counted, and the start of the rest of my career. My name is James Aponte. I'm prominently a writer, director, and editor, though I've done just about every role behind the camera you can think of, and sometimes in front of it too. 2023 marks the 10th year I've been making movies. That's wild stuff, the more you think about it. 10 years is a long time to do anything, especially something that can be as brutal as filmmaking. But it's something I love to do. And let's be real, if I didn't love it, I wouldn't have done it for 10 years. I think it's good to occasionally look back and see how far you've come in life. By looking back, you can see just how far you've actually come, and you can see how much further you need to go in terms of where you want to be at. And that's pretty cool. So join me as I look back at 10 films that epitomize my journey as a filmmaker so far. Let's jump in. Limbo was a trial by fire in a lot of ways. It was my first real test to see if I could make a movie. In a lot of ways, I'm super grateful it was such a challenge to make it. The parameters for the short film were set very much outside of what I was used to at the time. My instructor's guidelines were as follows. The film had to be surrealist in nature, it had to be 5 minutes in length, and it had to be shot on film. Shooting on film is a nerve-wracking experience, especially when you've never done it before. There's really no do-overs. You get 1, maybe 2 cracks at what you want, and that's it. So I learned to storyboard and pre-plan the shit out of movies. If you know what you want and have a plan on how to do it, it saves you a lot of trouble on set later. Another fun twist for shooting on film is the exposure has to be calculated by hand on a little device called a light meter. At the time, there was no way anyone in my class could just eyeball the exposure through the viewfinder. You had to use these light meters, and boy, did they give me nightmares. I had constant anxiety about the exposure levels. I even had a very vivid stress dream where the film came back from the lab, and it was all blank. Like, talk about the stuff of nightmares. As for the short film itself, I came up with a pretty bare-bones plot, if you can call it that. Although it is surrealist in nature, so I guess it's all pretty subjective. In high school, I was a pretty big fan of kinetic storytelling, things that really moved. Basically, the idea was I felt if things were moving along, it was less time for someone to get bored while they were watching it. Which is a long roundabout way of me saying I made movies with a lot of running in them, so I applied the same principle here, and a few other films we'll talk about later. Limbo really is a film about vibes more than anything. I went for the surrealist horror angle, thinking that'd be the most interesting way to take it. The characters run on subtext, hardly any text at all. But I think my main mission when I set out to make Limbo was to nail the exposures and create some awesome surrealist horror visuals. And for the most part, I think I achieved that pretty well. This short taught me a lot. It instilled an intense discipline for pre-production. It solidified my love of low-key, high-contrast lighting, that's for sure. It made me really love the look of black and white, particularly on film. There's still nothing quite like it. I'm incredibly grateful for the experience of making Limbo and all the things I learned. It taught me how to make movies the right way. Looking back, it's definitely a young filmmaker's first movie. I don't say that as a criticism, it's just an observation. It's someone finding their voice and creative vision, which is kind of the whole point of going to film school in the first place. To quote Star Wars, it was my first step into a larger world. For those who might know me, Disappearing Boy might be an unusual entry in this retrospective. It's not a particularly sexy movie. There's no big splashy visuals or effects, certainly no characters to speak of really. The film is really one big still life, a moving portrait capturing a scene or a moment in time. The title's doing a lot of heavy lifting here as far as the narrative goes. But I put Disappearing Boy in this retrospective because of what the film represented to me at the time. It wasn't so much about refining skills or telling a new story, it was more about the people I had made it with, and the circumstances under which we made it together. The film was a result of some really tight deadlines for multiple projects given out to my class by our instructor, so a lot of cross-coordination and trust had to be done in order to get these projects completed. The summer leading up to Disappearing Boy, a few of my fellow film students and I, Andy, Krista, and Tyler, had worked on a really ambitious web series under a different production banner. The making of that series was quite rough. Mistakes were made in places, particularly in regards to how I directed that show. But through all of it, the four of us were there for each other, and it bonded us in a very profound way. So much so that when the time came for these new projects, we all knew who to turn to. And I gotta say, it is super special to find people who will do just about anything for you because they want to see your vision, and you personally succeed. Krista and I froze our asses off one late November, or possibly early December, just shooting these outdoor shots of the shoes. And Andy and I were running around like madmen trying to get interior shots for this apartment stuff. In the hands of other people, working on a film like this would have been nothing but stress. But with them, it was nothing but fun. That's what Disappearing Boy really is all about for me. The web series we worked on might have made Andy, Krista, and Tyler my best friends, but it's Disappearing Boy that made them my best collaborators too. Pursuit was a really big deal for me. It was a short film that vindicated a lot of feelings I had about myself at the time, because I was coming off a very poor directorial performance regarding the web series I mentioned earlier. That experience had certainly taken a big toll on me mentally. I still have some mental scars from that ordeal. It was a very unpleasant time for me. So coming out of that, I knew I was way better of a writer and director than that experience showed I could be, and I wanted to prove it. It's funny because I remember I was talking to my friend Andy in the pre-production of Pursuit, and I mentioned I never wanted to do as bad of a job as I had done on that show ever again, in the director's chair. And he very succinctly said, well, congratulations, you aren't going to be. And that lifted a huge weight off my chest. It was very, very affirming for me. It helped in a lot of ways I don't think he even realized at the time, because it made everything going forward just like, we're going to be okay. It's going to be fine. So that was critical. Thank you, Andy, for doing that. The other thing about Pursuit that was special to me was it was genuinely something I hadn't seen anyone do in our film department ever. No one had tried to make this ambitious sci-fi action film for their senior project before, and I was pretty keen to make that all happen. That's one thing about me as a filmmaker is I want to do things that people haven't done before. I want to do the thing that someone says you can't do that, or I don't know if you can do that. I guess it all goes back to this competitive instinct I had playing sports for so many years. I don't know. So there was a lot to prove and a lot of ambitious stuff to pull off. There were drones, there were prop weapons, vehicles, working with great actors, securing locations, all of it was new territory I was very eager to tackle. But I couldn't do it alone, obviously. A director is only as good as the cast and crew around them, right? So I set out to put together a super team, if you will, of every super talented film student that I could think of, and I think that was definitely accomplished. You can see it in every shot of the film. It was like the Olympic dream team scenario for me. It was very exciting. It was a great time. Like all the movies I list here in this retrospective, I could talk about Pursuit for hours. There's a ton of stuff that went into this production, and I think it really shines. Definitely a standout piece from my early filmography, even all these years later. The particular highlight for me is the oneer we did. That was cool. I'm still super proud of it. It was something Andy, like, God bless him. All summer he was telling me, he was so skeptical. He was telling me all summer, man, I don't think we can get that. I don't know. And I was like, we can do it. Trust me, we'll be able to pull it off. And sure enough, on the day, my DPs get to the set, and I'm like, hey, I got this idea. And then we went up to the corridor, we did all the blocking, and then at the end of the day, it was our last shot of the day, and we just went for it. Like, we totally went through it, no rehearsal, just dove into it, and we got it in 4 takes. Like, that's awesome. That was super cool. Alright, this is shot 57, take 4. Come on, Josh. Okay, take 4, you're ready to fly. Action! Larry! Drone 1! Run! Steven! Light! Cut!
Shot 18C, take 1.
Action! If you want a more in-depth look at the behind the scenes, you can check out the Pursuit production diaries. I put those up on the channel a little while ago. I'll link the playlist at the end too, in case you don't want to go hunting for it.
I'm so sorry, I know what I'm doing. I just realized I go.
When Pursuit came out, it was, by all accounts, quite successful. It had a full house premiere and several festival runs soon after. I mean, hell, we even sold Blu-ray copies after the showing. Like, I don't remember anyone doing that. I've never done that before, certainly. It was all really, really cool. Pursuit vindicated a lot of things for me. It's an essential piece of who I am as a filmmaker. It's the film that I proved to myself that I belong here making movies. And after watching it recently, it still looks pretty darn slick, if I say so myself. So definitely go check it out. As some of you may have guessed, I love Daft Punk. They're my favorite band of all time. I desperately wish they would get back together. I was devastated when they broke up, but that's neither here nor there. After Pursuit was a success, I felt really comfortable exploring and trying new things. Silent Waltz was a perfect project for that. The prompt was to take lyrics from a song you liked and create a silent film based around them, hence the title Silent and Silent Waltz. Naturally, I picked Lose Yourself to Dance because Random Access Memories was just absolutely burned into my brain at that point. I was, and still am, completely in love with that album. It's so good. If you haven't listened, you guys, you gotta check it out. It's so awesome. My friends Krista and Tyler, I've mentioned them before, they were completely game to step in and perform a waltz in the film in their best snazzy outfits. They look great, by the way. And in Silent Waltz, you can see some of the first glimpses of the effects and traits that would become more prevalent in my later works. Things like bright, saturated colors, black and white fading into color, the image fading into multiple colors in the frame. It was a really fun shoot, and Silent Waltz is still one of my favorite films I made during that time. There's just something about watching the kinetic movement of their dance that I really like. There's this distilled joy captured in it for me, just a snapshot of a great time, and I think that's part of the reasons why I love it. And as we'll see later, it also gave me ample material to make many more short films from the different angles and setups we had from this one movie. Initially, when presented, Silent Waltz was indeed a silent film. There was no music, no sound effects, just the images. I ended up putting the song back onto the version that went up online, but I think even on its own, the movie still tells an interesting and unique story visually. Looking back on it, Silent Waltz is where I really started to blend experimental and conventional film techniques into the same place, something I would keep exploring further and further in the next films that I made.
Time's up, folks. What's the verdict?
Oh, I am so sorry, Sam, I am. Looks like the law was not on your side today.
And what's our sentence?
Looks like Sam I Am will be having his green eggs and ham on death row. Well, that's our show.
I was really into Black Mirror when I made Verdict, and it shows. After doing a lot of productions that were really intense, I wanted to do something more light and fun. Something that was not too production intensive, but still dystopian and sci-fi, but from a more satirical angle. And thus, Verdict was born. Now, you probably recognize all the familiar faces, but they're all here for a good reason. They're damn good collaborators, and I always want to keep working with damn good collaborators. Also, Tyler and Jeffrey can be pretty damn funny.
Fuck! Damn! God fucking damn it.
Originally, Verdict was much more in the vein of Pursuit. The original script was very serious, and it featured an intense interrogation between a policewoman and a criminal that ended with the revelation that the policewoman was the daughter of the criminal who murdered his wife and nearly killed her too. Super fun stuff, right? I'm glad I went the other way with this one. I think if I'd gone the original way, it would have been just too self-serious. One of the things that really made me better as a writer over the years, particularly most recently, is to inject more natural humor and comic relief into scripts. That's sort of a big pattern I see with most of the films in this retrospective. They're big on ideas and techniques, but maybe not enough humor. If I could go back, I think I would tell myself it's okay for characters to have fun and to laugh once in a while. But at the time, that's just where my headspace and creative voice was. Verdict went a long way towards me having that realization in the future, though. It was sort of the first time I gave myself permission to not be serious, to try and crack a joke once in a while. And that did me a big favor down the line, I think. That and my sister Elena telling me to, quote, stop trying so hard. Thank you, Ellie, I love you.
I'm up all night to get lucky. We're up all night to get lucky. We're up all night to get lucky.
Intimacy was peak experimental playground. I was at a point where I was creating a lot of experimental films at the time, and this was the culmination of a lot of new techniques I was playing with. That's one of the reasons why I love experimental film. It's the ultimate safe space. You can try any and all crazy wild techniques and styles, all without the fear of reprisal or messing something up. You can just go play, and I love that. That's something that really speaks to me. You can tell whatever story you want without structure or overt meaning. It's truly the purest art form of film, literally film as art, so shout out to experimental film. For months, I had wanted to do something with this B-roll footage I had of Silent Waltz, mainly because I thought there was a good opportunity for another film to be made out of that B-roll. I didn't remember this initially, I had to look up my old director's statement about the film, but apparently I was done editing another project, and I was just unwinding, listening to the Get Lucky remix by Daft Punk, and I was so struck with sudden inspiration I jumped into editing the project right away. What I do remember is how wonderfully instinctual and off the cuff the making of this movie was. It got to the point where the playback function on the program stopped working in my editing program, and I just kept going, never really knowing what the final product was going to be until I exported it. I guess it was the filmmaking equivalent to using a paintbrush to paint an impressionist painting while listening to music. And what came out, I think, is pretty cool. I still really like watching this one too. The way Krista moves between different color palettes is super cool, and I genuinely don't remember how I did it. Whether it was conscious or subconscious, I must have had Norman McLaren's Pas de Deux on the brain, because this film shares more than a few similarities. Even my instructor, shout out Tammy Kinsey, compared Intimacy to that film, which is stupid high praise, because that film is genuinely amazing if you haven't seen it. Intimacy was the best way to learn how to expand my creativity and editing techniques. Without it, I don't know if I would have been as confident or even ready to pull off all the tricks I needed for my next project. My first feature film.
Seeing things, Mr. Julian? Diluted dose, but it's pure concentrate. Straight from the source.
Which would be what?
The dream machine.
Dream machine.
Where else would dreams come from?
After I finished film school, I knew I was ready for one of two things, either a TV series or a feature film. Whichever one I ended up doing, I knew it was going to be new territory, and a pretty daunting task. I ended up deciding on a feature, because at the time there was a film grant submission going around that was offering first-time feature filmmakers $7,000 to make their first movie. Being a big fan of Robert Rodriguez, and all too familiar with the legend of his feature debut El Mariachi, I thought this was a sign to go for it. Unfortunately, I never won the grant. I remember being very depressed about it at the time. I thought I had a pretty unique feature idea that was totally doable for a $7,000 budget, and I also just thought it was genuinely pretty cool. But after thinking about it for a while, I decided, what the hell, let's just go for it and make the damn thing anyway. All the major cast and crew members I wanted were still in my local area, at least for the moment. And I was still familiar enough with everyone at my old school to lend me a few rehearsal spaces and other resources. So I dug into my life savings and set out to make a movie. Mariachi style. There is genuinely so much I could say about Dream Runner. So much went into the making of this film I could literally talk about it for hours. Especially if I gave it a beat-by-beat story about how it all came together. But I think for this retrospective I'll just try to stick to the main plot points. I think it first bears mentioning just what a great time this production was. This wasn't like Pursuit or Limbo, where there was just a lot of intensity and pressure that permeated almost everything that happened on the set. With those projects, there was a lot of just strenuous, I need to prove something energy throughout it. With Dream Runner, it was different. It was a little bit more chill, more laid back atmosphere. That doesn't mean we didn't have intense days or long nights. We definitely did. But my growth as a filmmaker and as a person really started to take shape here. I was a lot more relaxed and confident as a writer, director, and producer. I think it really helped that my production team featured a lot of the same people I'd worked with for a few years at that point, and the new collaborators that came in were equally great and gracious toward their coworkers and co-stars. I'll give them all a proper shout out at the end with a big list of credits for everyone who's helped over the years under the Time Bomb Productions banner. There's just too many to list here. But all of them, and I do mean all of them, were incredible, and without them, none of this gets made. As far as the movie itself goes, Dream Runner is a science fiction noir, set in a world in which humans have lost the capacity to dream. This leads to the creation of heavily regulated man-made dreams, with certain dreams being declared illegal. In order to get their fix with these illicit dreams, people turn to suppliers called Dream Runners. Drug suppliers, basically. The story of the film jump-starts when a Pinkerton named Julian, played by Jeffrey Burden, is hired by a dream runner named Dana, played by Olivia Pierce, to serve as her muscle for a few overnight deliveries. But as the night goes on, and the more deliveries Julian sees, the closer both of them find themselves toward the creator of man-made dreams, the Dream Machine. Now, if that's not a blend of experimental and conventional film, I don't know what is. I learned so much on this movie. Like I set out to do on every project, I did things I'd never done before. I worked with blue screen for the first time. I learned how to do color masking and other VFX stuff. I shot in real locations with real extras in the background, and boy was that complicated. And maybe most critically, I learned that if I had to, I could step up behind the lens and take the reins as a cinematographer and get a pretty cool image. Long story short was my DP Andre was unavailable for a few days and I had to step in and shoot when he was gone. And you cannot tell in the final film, which makes me very, very proud. And speaking of proud, I'm super proud of this movie. There's some really good stuff in here. Dream Runner's far from flawless, but when it does something well, it does it really well. There's some excellent shots in there for starters. The car stuff I'm immensely proud of. It looks like they're driving. It keys out really well. There's some great performances in here. I particularly love the scene right after Dana and Julian go to Robbie's house, and Dana sees Julian as a human being for the first time. Or when Julian and Dana talk about the condition of Dana's sister. The entire sequence turned out really well. It's all really great stuff. Again, it's hard to overstate. I'm just so proud of this movie. It's a testament to all the really talented and great people who worked on it, and I was so happy to see their hard work rewarded multiple times over. For its festival premiere, back in my hometown in 2018, the screening was sold out. Giant lines out the door. I think everyone I knew ever in my life was there. It was crazy. People I didn't expect to see were there. My man Andy flew in from LA, my homies Krista and Tyler came in from Cleveland. It was wild. It felt like such an event. It's kind of hard to explain. It felt like a big deal. Like the crowd was great. They were locked in, they were passionate, and they rewarded us with some hardware. We won the Audience Award and Best Local Film Award at that festival. It's still, all of these years later, one of the best nights of my life. Not just because it was a full house and everyone showed up and liked it. It was because I got to share it with everyone I love and care about. That's really special stuff. The icing on the cake, cherry on top, whatever metaphor you want to use, that was a vindication of everyone's hard work and dedication on this movie was in March of 2020. After navigating a lot of distributors and sales agents, Dream Runner was available for streaming on Prime Video. It's pretty wild when you think about it. Here was a self-funded, shoestring, budget, sci-fi noir indie movie from the Midwest made for $4,500, now on one of the biggest digital distributors in the world. That's pretty cool if you ask me. It was a perfect way to put a bow on the film, to really give closure to everyone who worked on it, because in the years after its premiere, I'd always get questions from people asking where to watch the film, or asking for a private link that I could send to them. But with this, I finally had somewhere I could point them to, where they could watch and show anyone and everyone who wanted to see it. And if you want to see it too, by all means, please check it out on Prime Video. I'll include a link in the description. Dream Runner will forever be a special film to me. Not only was it my first feature, but it was also when I got to see just how many people genuinely cared for what I was doing, who I was, and what lengths they would go to support the movies I was making. It just leaves me speechless. So to everyone who worked on Dream Runner, who came to the premiere, who watched it on Prime Video, thank you. It means more than you'll ever know, especially in the year 2020 and the years that would follow. Following the making of Dream Runner and everything that followed, I took some time off. I had lost a very unhealthy amount of weight in a very short time working on it, and I needed some time to recover. Me not taking care of myself on productions is sort of a bad pattern of behavior I need to break. While in my recovery, the YouTube channel Film Riot announced a 1-minute short film contest they were hosting in partnership with a company called Filmstro. Turns out, it's just what the doctor ordered. I'd fallen into a fairly deep bout of depression after I finished Dream Runner. I'd put so much of myself into the movie, and the bond that the cast and crew all had with one another was really special. We'd been through a lot together, and I felt a great connection with everyone on that production. I was so sad to see it go. But when I caught wind of this 1-minute short film contest, it gave me an opportunity to get back in the swing of things with old collaborators, and let me tell you, we had a lot of fun making Can't Get Out of Bed. Can't Get Out of Bed is actually the first of 3 1-minute shorts we made for the contest. Each of them all ended up being interconnected in some way, but Can't Get Out of Bed certainly stands out on its own. I have to thank my dad for the main concept on this one. I was really struggling going from making a story that fit a feature to one that fit a 1 minute, and he gave me great ideas for all 3 shorts that we made. I think what we got for this one works really well. I liked the concept a lot of someone who literally couldn't get out of bed in the morning, like he was trapped in this horrible infinite time loop that would go on forever. That's why at the end of the short you see Jeffrey with a beard when he didn't have one before. I think the strange thing about Can't Get Out of Bed looking back on it now is that it signaled an end of an age, so to speak. The following year after this, I would move to another city, get a new videographer job, and I wouldn't end up making a new feature, short film, or any film, really, for the next 5 years. It might go without saying, but the pandemic played a huge reason as to why. I still wrote a lot of scripts and things like that, but that was really the only thing I could do with the time I had in the post-get-out-of-bed period until recently. It was also the last time I would work with some of my favorite collaborators, except for Jeffrey. He's always game to do anything, pretty much. A lot of those collaborators moved on to bigger and better things, deservedly so. Some even won freaking Emmys, like, that's amazing. Shout out to Andre, he's doing great work out there. All in all, it's a nice, fun little bookend to a really incredible run of making movies in a very small window. From 2013 to 2018, I made a total of 20 short films and 1 feature film, and worked with over 50 amazing collaborators. That's pretty special stuff, and it's something I'm ever more appreciative of now, because that's not something that happens very often, I think. That's a lot, in general, to happen in a 5-year window, let alone making movies in that time. It's certainly an era I look back on with great fondness and gratitude.
Everybody dancing on the floor. Everybody dancing on the floor. Are you ready to get on the floor?
Like I mentioned when I talked about Can't Get Out of Bed, there was a long, essentially, hiatus I had from making films. I won't get into all the ugly details of how my life essentially fell apart with the onset of the pandemic, but let's just say filmmaking fell to the bottom of my priorities list. In the years that followed 2020, I was able to gradually recover my health, my mental health, my finances, my living situation, and I was able to start thinking about making movies again. One of the first and most important steps I took towards making new short films again was being more active on my YouTube channel, which some of you may have noticed in the past year. I started making fun little videos and editing exercises, just things that would ease me back into the whole filmmaking process again. Waltz Remix was the culmination of this return to production. Coincidentally, Apart from 2023 being the 10th anniversary of me making movies, it's also the 10th anniversary of Daft Punk's Random Access Memories. And as part of their celebration of the 10th anniversary of RAM, Daft Punk released a bunch of B-sides and alternate takes of songs from that album. I absolutely fell in love with one particular track titled LYTD. It's an early demo version of Lose Yourself to Dance, but to me, it plays on its own as an entirely new and amazing track in of itself. Something akin to one of their trademark remixes. Seeing as how this was the 10th anniversary of my own accomplishment, I decided I'd do a remix of my own for my short film Silent Waltz, using LYTD as an echo of using Lose Yourself to Dance on the original short. And I gotta say, cutting Waltz remix was super fun. It was like I was back in the editing bay at film school, just following editorial instinct, incorporating new techniques I'd done on newer YouTube videos earlier in the year. I think it turned out super well. It looks so cool, and gives a nice, fresh new spin on the original short. I prefer it to Silent Waltz after seeing them side by side. There's such a kinetic energy and vibrancy in the cut that blows the original short film out of the water. Kind of amazing how much mileage I got out of all that footage from so long ago, huh? Waltz Remix was the perfect way to get back into that filmmaking groove. Just don't call it a comeback.
Let's get started.
All right. Where are you?
Part of my motivation to make Vejigante was to commemorate the first short film I ever made, that little horror short we talked about called Limbo. And if you compare the two, you can actually see the DNA of Vejigante in Limbo, even back then. But Vejigante really is a testament to how far I've come in my filmmaking career. My friend Andy described it as, quote, an evolution of finesse, unquote. His words, not mine. It's a little too fancy for how I would describe it. I would just say it's good stuff. But I see what he's getting at. The shots are executed super well. The acting is great, the film looks great, the creature design works super well, which is a huge relief, since I was very worried about it. It's the end result of someone who spent 10 years working on the craftsmanship of making movies, from writing to directing to editing, etc. But I learned new things too. I'd never done a creature feature before, so I learned how to put a papier-mâché monster head together. I learned how to build a monster from the ground up. I learned VFX and how to implement them in ways that worked for me in the film. That's always the goal whenever I start a new project. I'm always trying to learn and do new things I haven't done before. To me, that's the hallmark of getting better at your craft and making better work. And looking back on the films in this retrospective, I think I can say that's pretty much what happened on every single production. Something new was learned, something already known was made better. And that's kind of the weird thing I noticed as I was making Vejigante. Even though this is my 10th year of making movies, only now am I just starting to feel like I'm coming into my own as a writer, as a director, and as a filmmaker in general. It's really put a lot of things in perspective for me. I don't feel as bad as I did for not being where I want to be yet in my career. I can chill out a little more. It doesn't mean my motivation or work ethic has diminished in any way. It just means I have a little more grace and forgiveness towards myself. That's been one of the nicer self-discoveries I've had coming out of my 5-year film hiatus. It makes me appreciate this stuff way more than I used to. It makes me cherish the friendships I've made, the collaborators I've worked with, and the work I've been able to create in the short amount of time that I've been in this world. I hope to keep doing it for as long as I can. This retrospective has been an interesting experience for me. It's provided a lot of perspective, as I mentioned. It's brought up old memories, mostly good memories. I went back and forth on whether I should even make it for a while, but every time I was close to scrapping the whole thing, my friends would get very excited when I told them about the idea of this retrospective. And honestly, that means a lot. It gave me permission to talk about myself and my work in a way I don't think I would have gotten to on my own. So in a lot of ways, this retrospective is dedicated to them and all the others who've collaborated on the many Time Bomb Productions projects over the past decade. Without them, my dreams turning into reality is not even possible, let alone my career. The word that kept popping up in this retrospective was grateful. Grateful and appreciative. That's all I can keep saying about my collaborators, my friends, and my family who've supported me over the years. And to all of you, who either watched my work in the past or are watching this right now. Without you, I'm just making films in a vacuum, and no film deserves to be in a vacuum. Well, maybe a few I can think of, but I'll keep those to myself. Looking back, I can safely say the past 10 years represented tremendous growth, both in terms of being a person and as a filmmaker. Each outing has gotten progressively better and better, and that's all you can really ask for as an artist, right? Going forward, I'm not sure where the next decade will take me, although honestly, I can't wait to see what films I make over the next 10 years. With any luck, it'll be closer or further than where I want to be in my career right now. If all goes well, I'll be telling you all about it for the 20-year retrospective. In the meantime, I'll be sure to check in here every now and then. Thanks for watching. Keep up the good work.